Hey, welcome into the REVO Church Podcast. I'm so excited that you jumped on and clicked on this video. You saw the title and you said, man, I'm excited about this. See, I'm Jamie, I'm the host here, and here's what happened. I am joined on the couch by two dads.
Yeah.
And so, hey, do you want to take a chance real quick and just give yourself a little introduction? Maybe tell people why you are the dadliest of dads?
Go for it, Kev.
All right, cool. Kevin Harrison, and I'm the dadliest of dads because I've dad a lot. That's for sure. 3 kids. Got the bookend boys, a 20-year-old, 15-year-old boy, and then I have a 17-year-old daughter right in the middle, and so they have me dadding quite a bit.
Awesome. I'm Jason. I was built for dadding because of my dad jokes.
Oh.
And like this comes prior to even having any son. So we've got 2, Carson and Caleb. One is 2, will be 3 this summer, and the other is 8-ish months. And by the second one, you don't count in weeks or months anymore. It's just like he's not 1 yet. We'll get there.
He exists.
Yeah.
I like that. So do you feel like the dad jokes led into becoming a dad, or did they level up once you got it?
It only gets better. My wife would probably say worse.
She's probably like, we need to stop.
But hey, I had them before she married me, so like that's on her.
That's great. So in this podcast, here's what we're gonna do. Every week we're gonna invite we're gonna have dads, we're gonna have moms, we're even gonna have volunteers in our world and student ministry. And each week we're gonna sit down and talk with them about how we can invest in the next generation, how we can pour into them, how we can help build them up. And so for you guys specifically, we're going to be talking about just how you can pour into your kids as a dad. And so I'm excited about that. But like I said, today we're going to be talking with dads. And so right off the bat, this is one of the most important things. We're talking about pouring in, investing in the next generation, pouring in with your kids. And so is there anything that you do to spiritually pour into your kids? Like, is there things that maybe as they were younger, you started pouring into them, or as they get older, things that, you hope to do? Or Kevin, for you, your kids are out of the baby stage. So things that you're doing that you're like, man, Jason, we did this and it's gold. Like, what's some things right off the bat that y'all do to try to pour into your kids?
Yeah, so I'll take it first to say, like, one, it's like ultimately recognizing that a lot of the things that God has done in my children's lives has been despite me, right? But I think one of the things that sticks out the most to us that was important, I think both my wife and I had this experience as children, and recognizing how important it was to us, we instilled that early on, and that's just harnessing the community of believers. To pour into your life, because we had good relationships maybe with your parents, but like you really remember that youth leader, or you really remember that other dad or that other family that you spent time with, that you were just maybe more open to receiving some feedback from, like you took it to heart more. And so just kind of recognizing that it was important early on, where we just exposed our children to a village, and it was a village that had this similar kind of values we had, that were following Christ, followers of Christ. And so for us, when I look back, I mean, that was really this cushion of support that we intentionally provided and have provided. And so when I look back, a lot of it's just like my kids are who they are because of way more than just their mom and I.
Yeah, man, that is exactly the same for us. We're just lucky and blessed to be in the community, to where when Carson was first 8 or so weeks, he was in the church. Same for Caleb. So not having to do it alone, having a community around you is just, we're also not on an island, right? There's other people around to support. That's just been such a huge blessing to our family, and to the point where Carson loves to go to, he calls it his Bible room.
I love
and he wants to go to play with his friends at church. So it's turning church from many see it as a have to a get to.
Mm-hmm.
And they just love coming here. So shout out our world. And the community of believers has just been hugely impactful.
Yeah, I think, we're going through a series at church on the book of Acts, and we're looking at, the early church, and we're studying and seeing how they did life together. I mean, the book of Acts. It's not, this is how they set up their sermons and this is how, worship was at the church. It was, this is how the body of believers is doing life. And so, I love hearing both of y'all say, well, hey, like, what do we do spiritually? We found a body of believers that would, pour into our kids and care for our kids. I know, like, Kevin, I got the honor of having all three of your kids in student ministry.
Yeah.
Zeke for a little bit, and then we've had Kate for a while, and God willing, we'll have Truett from sixth grade all the way until a senior, and so I'll get to see Truett sixth grade not care about anything to senior year. Well, he'll probably still only care about golf, but that's just who he is. So outside of a body of believers and seeking that, we know prayer life is very important. We are all the time called to pray. It's one of the spiritual disciplines, is prayer, right? Is there prayers, maybe like, Jason, is there any prayers that you're praying over Caleb and Carson now?
Yeah, well, I mean, prayer for them and then prayers with them. I think, prayers with them are basic at this age.
Yeah.
And, we were watching, I think Sesame Street was on the other day, and he goes, a Cookie Monster not praying. So, like, the fact that he sees prayer is awesome, to value it. But in terms of what do we pray for them, it's Matthew 16. It's if we gain the whole kingdom and we lose our soul, then we gain nothing. So it's for a relationship with Jesus. So we can pray for all the extras, and those are nice to haves. Like I hope Carson's the golfer the Truett is, and I hopefully they can both play on the tour together. And but all those things are just extras. And so that's really where I think our priority and prayers are for him and for Caleb.
Yeah. I think sometimes too, just like in your own life, in our children's lives, you can get so bogged down at the details and like praying specific things about their day or whatever it may be. And fortunately, I'm, blessed enough to where I know that my children, all three, have relationships with Christ, right? So that prayer is one that we say, congratulations, it's been answered. Thank you. Exactly. But, about 14 years ago, I was introduced to a prayer for children from another pastor I was listening to, and he prayed it. It was like simple. He was just like, hey, I pray this with my children at night. And I found myself just develop that same discipline in that moment, not only with them as we pray at night or whatever, but also to myself when I'm driving to work, And it's just real simple. It's just God, give them the wisdom to know right from wrong and the courage to do what's right, even when it's hard. And it's just kind of a mantra, and it's just like simple, wisdom to know right from wrong, and courage to do what's right, even when it's difficult. And so that's like this simple little, 15-second prayer that's become like a daily routine over each child. And so that would be the one that sticks out the most, that they could repeat it. And obviously I say it when they're not even looking,
Yeah, that's good.
No, that's real good. That's something I know, like, one of the things when I'm praying for people, the number one thing that I pray for when I pray for people is that they would just have wisdom. Because we know, like, reading, I believe it's the book of James. And if I'm wrong, I 100% know people.
Put it in the comments.
Put it in the comments. You were wrong. It was not James. It was John. But I believe it's the book of James talks about if we ask for wisdom, that God will graciously give us wisdom. That he's not holding it back. He'll graciously give it. And so I like that you said that, like, for Jason, he's like, he's praying over his two boys, like, please let them find salvation and see that you're the most important. And now you're saying, hey, we were praying those. God was gracious. He answered those. And so now my prayer is, Lord, don't let them be stupid. Lord, let them have some wisdom. But being dads, being men, there's something. So the Bible talks about how men are the spiritual heads of the household. We see it when God created everything. Genesis chapter 1, chapter 2, he created Adam and Eve. We see how from creation that man was set to be the head, the leader. And so, my question really for you is, how do you strive, like, knowing that biblically you're called to be the leader in your household? How do you lead your household? Like, is there things you do? Like, how do you lead? I mean, y'all are both married. So how do you lead your wife, but also how do you lead your kids? And what does that take? Like, is that stuff from you that you're doing, or maybe you're trying to model it? Like, what does that look like for you?
So I would just say, like, I think, and even now, it's still a process of learning what that means, because the depth is like unfathomable to a degree.
Yeah.
Like, you're not going to do it. So, but at the same time, the realization for me was like, I used to have this picture of leadership that would look more like you pulling on a stubborn goat. And so you're leading that animal, right?
Yeah.
But that's not a really good image of what leadership looks like. If you feel like you're the ones having to pull people around the household or get them to change or whatever it may be by pulling, good luck to you with that. It wasn't very effective, and trust me, I've tried it plenty of times. Versus the picture of leadership, which is like, let me come down to your level, get behind you, and push you up, right? And or just come alongside you, maybe not even try to give effort to changing you, just be with you where you are, right? So that's kind of what Christ did, right?
Yeah.
If you just think about it. And so really becoming what Christ did, where he loved so much that he gave up his position to get down on our level. And so kind of mirroring that with like, hey, I may not effectively, don't trust your senses, trust scripture. So I'm just going to get down to your level and know that Christ can do the work for me, or he's there. He's the one producing it anyway. So let me just meet you where you are. And like I said, I mean, I'm by far not the perfect example of how to do this. But when you do it and you feel it, it's kind of like, and then you just watch and you see that, it's kind of like the vine analogy. I think like, if you just rest in me and then all of a sudden you look out on the vine and all of a sudden, bloop, 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 these things start popping up in your kid's life and you're like, that's great. And it's like, I didn't even do anything. That's good. But, so I think, the effort, kind of watch that, if you feel like you're pulling, maybe reconsider.
Yeah. I think even just from the household standpoint, it's so easy to get wrapped up in kids too. And like, shoot, our kids are combined, like not even like 3.5. So we don't even have all the activities and the stuff yet. Like we'll get there. But life
have all the nighttime routines though.
Yeah. I mean, it's easy to just get bogged down in the day to day. So I think from that standpoint, as a dad, it's important to even just take a step back and remember first role as husband. And that can be really hard to do when, you're tired at the end of the day and you just got the kids to bed and like you want your just half hour to like zone out. So I think that's first and foremost from the family standpoint. And then just everyone talks about modeling for their kids, right? And that is great, but you can't model if you're not present. So I think just being able to be around and show it in person, it's one thing to talk it but they can't see it if they don't see you.
Yeah.
And being around, being present, being in the family and with the family, that's really going to rub off on them.
That's good. One thing I've always noticed, so I don't have kids, spoiler alert, but I have a bunch of nieces and nephews. My niece and nephews range all the way. I'm 27, which means I have a niece that's 27. Her birthday's in February, mine's in October. So I have a niece that's 27, all the way down to a nephew that's right at 1 year old. So I have a full gambit of, I grew up essentially brother and sister all the way to like, you were born a year ago and like I'm holding you in my arms. And so one thing that's really cool is that, from the uncle standpoint, I got to see that like when I was younger, let's say we're outside and I said a word that had, that's not very nice. Well, here's what would happen. We would be at Christmas or we'd be at Easter, 4th of July, shooting basketball. I'd miss the shot. Something would come out of my mouth. We'd go back up to the house and wouldn't you guess it?
Hit the replay button.
My nephew was just over and over and over and over. And where'd you learn that word, Mark? And he'd start pointing at me. So all that to say is has there been things maybe we don't want to talk about the bad things because I'm sure you can both be like, yeah, we've done this and then they picked it up and now we're like, where'd you learn that? Mommy, right?
Yeah.
But is there things maybe in your spiritual life that you've seen that, as you do it, maybe it's like things that you do personally that now you're noticing that, your kids started picking up? Or maybe it's just like good habits, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it gets back to kind of what he was saying. Like sometimes you'll start noticing things are caught instead of taught, right? But in order to be caught, like you got to be there, present. And so I think that one of the things that I can tell all my children have caught from us, and it really wasn't intentional. Like Dean and I didn't sit down and like draw this plan out. That was, a lot of intentionality. Like, this is how we're going to get them to catch it. It was more like we were doing it because the need was there, and we just drug our children along to do it with it. And that would be service. So like, we've always served in wherever we've been, whether it's been at church, but it's not necessarily church. It could be just something in the community. And it's just kind of like, well, you're going with us, and then it's not asking. Like, so now after church, if you know North Campus, our whole family gets involved with Strike Force. And so like, it's a joint issue, and we don't have to like, hey, Truett, I need you to go do this. Like, it's just like, they do it.
And it's popping up and going.
And never, ever in the 7 years we've done it or whatever, have any of my children been like, oh, we have to do this, ever, So it's like, that's one of those behaviors that I think, again, like, it gets back to what you're saying. It was just something that my wife and I, Dean and I, have modeled, and now you see them doing it. Like Kate, my daughter, she serves in capacities we don't even know about until she's like, oh, I'm going to do this. And we're like, really? I didn't even know she was leading women's prayer breakfast. And then all of a sudden she shoots me a snapshot of her sitting at the table. I'm like, oh, that's great. I mean, maybe tell me about this.
I would have.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I don't know if that would have been invited, but yeah. Yeah, but so I think that comes to mind.
Yeah, I think of worship, and not talking in like stage on Sundays, but just like personal worship. One of like, to the point where if I hear All Hail King Jesus one more time in the van, I will go crazy. But like, it's just something that it's present, it's part of our lives. And like, it's either going to be Frozen songs or it's probably going to be All Hail King Jesus in the car.
Yeah.
I like that. There's a verse that has always challenged me, and I'm not even a dad. So if it's challenging me, like, I can't imagine how it challenges you guys. It's Ephesians chapter 6, verse 4. It says this, it says, fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but raise them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. Now, as a kid, I was not a great kid. I can say that. My parents watch this podcast. Me saying I'm not a great kid, they're going to be like, hallelujah. He admits it. One thing that always has questioned me is when it comes to this verse specifically, how can you discipline a child without provoking them to anger? Because I'll be honest, when I got disciplined as a kid, I was angry. So what does that look like? Like, how can you discipline? Because they do something wrong and you know it's wrong, and let's be honest, even if they say they don't know it's wrong, they know it's wrong. But how can you discipline or correct that without leading into anger?
Go ahead. I would love to learn from you.
No, I mean, yeah. So here's how I would take that. Is not necessarily like, if your child exhibits any sense of anger or frustration with something you've asked them to do, then you've broken that. Like, I think, they got to throw that out the window. That's not the thought. I don't think that's the thought behind it. I think it's more of like my posture in how I lay out the whatever that particular discipline is. So it's like, hey, I need you to pick your clothes up off your floor. It's like, I did that yesterday. I could stand up and say, I'm leader of this household. You're going to listen to what I got to say right now, or else I'm going to bend you, no. Or I could just say like, hey, look, I know I'm with you with that. It's frustrating. There's things we got to do. So how can I help you with that? Whatever it may be. So it's more of the posture on how I confront that initial, whatever I want to do right there. If I want to dig in, then it's kind of like the old cliche, like you can win the fight, but lose the relationship. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's ultimately what that verse is saying, like, don't lose the relationship over confrontation like that. Rather, come beside them and lead them in a godly manner, which would be, I hear what you're saying. I know it doesn't feel good, but there's still a way to lead, and there's still a way to say, to discipline. Discipline. I don't like it when God disciplines me. Like, it can make me frustrated and angry too. But He didn't respond by saying, "Oh yeah, well, I'm gonna make it even harder for you then if you whatever." So it's just gonna be like discipline. Again, work. It's not punishment. So understanding the difference between those two too.
I think that's the big thing. I've heard. I don't remember who it was. it might have been Nathan talking about just discipline versus punishment. And I think that's where a lot of people go wrong. You mentioned it. Do you want to tell what the difference is between discipline and punishment?
Well, in my mind, discipline is like ultimately looks at the end in mind. So, what's my end goal? And so, with discipline, it is I am working for the betterment of this child or the betterment of this person. So, it's going to serve that end versus punishment, which is you've done something wrong. Now we got to weigh the scales. Right. So, I got to take from you something. It's not working towards your good.
Yeah.
And so, that's the difference there in my mind.
Yeah. I think where we're at, like, that's why I wanted to hear from you, because being further down the journey, it's a lot different disciplining a 2.5-year-old versus someone in their teens. So that's something that we're going to have to learn. Like, not to say that punishment and discipline and those things are a joy of fatherhood, but their correction is still necessary. But I'd say even at this age for us, it's if they can come out and know the corrected behavior and still know that we love them and have their best interest in mind, that's the win. So like right now, I can't remember a time where I've disciplined Carson and it not ended with like hugging him, telling him I love him.
Yeah.
Now at this age, he's a little more receptive to that and jumping in my arms and crying on my shoulder. When he's 15, I don't know how that's going to roll. So I think that's something I have to grow in as well.
And there's like a beauty in the fact that you have children, whether they're 2 or whether they're 12 or whether they're 18. I mean, there's a beauty in the fact that they're willing to even express their emotion and how they feel to you. Like, be thankful for that, because there's plenty of situations where parents and children don't have that type of relationship where they don't even want to express emotion to them. And so like, that's a good thing, but it's like, how do you take that in? And, answering emotion with emotion versus like logic or reasoning or whatever it may be. That's a big part of it too. Like, just be emotional with them. It's okay. It's good.
No, I think that's good. Have you ever hit the line of this is gonna hurt me more than it's gonna hurt you?
I haven't yet, but only because like that's etched somewhere on the back of my head. From childhood, I was confronted that along with the wooden spoon many a time in childhood. Yeah. So thanks, Mom and Dad.
That's funny. Yeah, I think I've said that, but like as sarcastically as I got older or something like that. Yeah. It's been like a form of sarcasm.
I've heard people say that, and I'm like, your butt's not getting tore up, mine is.
I remember, I'd be crying on the bed and be like, well, then don't do it. I don't want to hurt you, Dad.
I think that's just etched somewhere in every person's brain of like, this happens. So I'm curious. We talk about spiritual disciplines. It's been heavy on my mind. It's been heavy on the YouTube channel. Hey, we've been posting spiritual disciplines. Just a quick recap. You have Bible reading, Bible study, prayer, serving, fasting, worship, generosity, and rest. That's the 8. It would have been really embarrassing if I would have missed one of those. But out of those 8, I'm not going to ask you, like, do you remember what I just said? But when we're thinking spiritual disciplines, is there a way that you try to instill those in your kids? Do you see them like, for you, Kevin, do you see like, Truett, Zeke, Kate, do you see them like living out some spiritual disciplines that maybe, you're like, how'd they pick that up? Or you're like, they saw me wake up every morning, and so now they're starting. Like, is there, do you see that becoming like a instilling aspect or?
Yeah, so I mean, you get back, one of them was serve, right? So we kind of touched upon that a little bit. That's definitely evident in all their lives, as I just look at it. And then beyond that, I think one of the things that, teenagers are just so busy, and so you can try to stress. And one of the things I've tried to stress, is the rest aspect. And so I think, I would say that we haven't been as successful as I would like to perceive we have been, but it has been something that we've talked about. And so it becomes not just spiritually, like how we rest, but physically too, just physically, like understanding what it feels like. I talk about sympathetic and parasympathetic system. And my kids look at me like I'm like, what? And so we kind of explain what that means, but basically understanding like what your body feels like when it's anxious or uptight or whatever it is. And then ways of like to bring that down a notch.
Yeah.
And so it's healthy to do that like maybe weekly. Like, so like, we have that one day of rest or whatever that might look like, but it's also intraday, like recognizing that too, where you can get that little periods of rest. And so that's saying a prayer or just kind of like refocusing on what priorities are versus getting consumed with what's in front of your face at the moment. And so I would say that's something that we talk about and I hope is getting better. But that's in this culture, it's very hard.
Yeah. I mean, for us, it goes back to something you said earlier, Kevin. It's like when they're at a certain age, they don't have a choice.
Yeah.
So that's the beauty in some of this is like they're along for the ride. And eventually that just rubs off and that becomes part of their routine, part of their habits that they're growing and being accustomed to. So like prayer is it's something we've done every night with Carson before we put him to bed. And if we forget to do it, or like now it's sometimes at nap time, he's like, no, daddy, prayer. It's like, all right, so we'll do a quick prayer. Cause like now part of that's just his habit and routine, but it's like, I mean, it's something that he's going to grow up with and that's going to be part of his life.
Yeah. I mean, if you're going to form good habits, right? If he's going to form habits, why not have it be a habit of, well, we pray before we lay down.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of parents that'd be like, please let that be a habit of my child.
I heard a guy say it. It's so true too, because I tried it for a little period of time. We were listening to a podcast right when the boys were laying down when Zeke was still at home in high school. But you can teach systematic theology to any child right at bedtime because they want to stay up, right? So you can do it. That's the best time. No, so you can go deep right there because they're like, what? So we had this podcast, like Ask Pastor John podcast, and I'm like, no kid wants to listen to that, right? But like my boys Zeke got to the point where he's like, hey, let's play APJ. Let's play APJ before bedtime, right? I get to stay up a little longer.
Yeah.
But I mean, now here he is 20, and I guarantee you can think back and like, I remember, this and this and this, and these questions and stuff like this. So it's like, hey, that's a good discipline right there at bedtime. They'll stay up and listen to anything.
I like that. I can remember being the kid that was like, I don't want to go to bed. I'll stay up. I'll watch that TV show that I don't care about just so I can stay up.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's hilarious. You're like, you want to stay up?
Here it is.
Here's some Jesus for you. Go learn some systematic theology.
That's right.
Learn some who is God.
Yeah.
Let's find out together. I like that. So as we close, I just want to give you a chance because I know there's parents that'll watch this. There's dads that are going to watch this that are like, in their head, they're thinking, I would love to raise my kids to grow up and be godly men and women. They want to be the spiritual leaders of their households. They want to start instilling, like you said, Kevin, of instilling the mantra of, in this house we serve. We serve. We don't ask questions. We say, what can we do? And so is there any advice that you would give maybe a dad or just parents that are watching?
I mean, so for me, it would be like, first, become aware of the rhythm of your household. So like maybe for whatever reason, I can check out, right? It's easy for me to be passive and just come in and not really know what's happening in the household. So the first part is just kind of sit and become aware. What's the rhythm of my household with my wife, with my children, with me interacting with them? And then like the next part, it would be like, small moves make big difference over time. And so it's that picture of like a little drip on a rock. Over time, man, it chisels that thing away. And so in the household, don't feel like you have to have these wholesale changes tomorrow, but it may be that small little thing you put in the family can make big differences, and you can build upon that as you go forward. And then the final thing, the third part of that is, I said it earlier, like, don't trust your senses. Trust Romans 8:28.
Yeah.
God's at work through all things, for your good, and that includes you, your family, your wife, whatever it may be. So trust that in place of your senses, because you may not see it immediately, but you just trust it. So that's what I say.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think it goes back to the community aspect for me that we talked about early on, like leadership, fatherhood, husbanding.
Ooh, that's a word.
Just even parenting, all those things can be very isolating.
There's a lot of bending and husbanding too.
Right? Absolutely. So like,
have a strong back.
Say just don't try to do it alone. You don't have to. So when we found out that we were having two boys, we had to reach out to who do we know that has like, how do we boy parent? I grew up in a household of girls. And that's kind of what I was mentally prepped for. And it's like, how do we do this? We reached out to Pastor Stephen at the Walkertown campus, having 2 boys himself and Kim. And it's like, what does it look like to be a boy dad? So moral of the story is just don't feel like you have to do it alone. So whether it's people pointing you back to Jesus during hard times, being encouragement in those times, but just, it can also just be the practical of, hey, here's a book on how to, change some diapers, or here's some compression socks because I know your feet are swelling and you're super pregnant right now. So sometimes it's the basics, but just don't isolate yourself. Our groups are here, your church community is here, and there are people around you that love you and want to help you.
No, I think that's great. Man, I appreciate you guys being willing to come on to show that, hey, just because you're a dad doesn't mean you can't be super cool and sit on the couch.
At least half of it's true, right?
But man, I appreciate you guys so much. I appreciate you guys for watching. This was episode 1. Stay tuned next week as we kick the dads out and we bring the moms in. So I'm excited about it. We'll see you next time.